So, the goddess, hot topic, right? Full of intrigue, maybe controversy, juicy. So, when I say goddess, now, of course, with all of us living in a Western world, predominantly Christian world, if you will, country, the goddess is not something most of us are familiar with growing up, of course, unless you're like me, growing up in a Hindu household where it was normal. My mother and father, when they would refer to God, it was always mother, ma, right? So for me, when I realized, oh, wait a minute, you guys don't call God mother in school, it was kind of, a revelation. So, of course, then as I started learning about the Bible and Western religion in general, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, you don't see the divine feminine anywhere. Unless, of course, in the Catholic world, you still have the Virgin Mary. But still, the female saints are rare, if at all, anywhere. And so, it's a missing element, obviously, in our psyche and culture growing up in America in the West. And personally, I think it's been a big tragedy from my point of view and from a non-Western point of view, because it's not supposed to be this way, is the thing. When we read in the Bible, God made us in His image, well, it doesn't quite work, if you're a woman and you're calling God the Father, but we just kind of take that for granted and just continue on with that. And so, the idea of the goddess, when I say it's a tragedy, because before the Christian era, it was a predominant natural way of connecting and talking to the divine, as the divine feminine. And when I say goddess, I really mean the divine feminine. What that really means, we'll get into in just a minute, but the earliest depictions of anything divine that we found archaeologically is a woman, in essence. And some of the ancient, remains that we have, the depictions of versions of the goddess is what we find. So, my assertion is that the goddess was the original predominant way of connecting with the divine. And I'll explain why in just a minute. And so, as some of you know, I pull in a lot of Asian, Indian philosophy and understanding as a foundational substrate for a lot of what I say, right? So it's a mixing of, what I present to you is but it is a mixing and a synthesis and integration of Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, native shamanism, and what I would say the original essences of Christian mysticism and the original thrust of Christianity, how it started in the Essene community and in the Gnostic community and some of those things. And of course, the mystery schools as we have them today, as most of you are familiar with, are offshoots of most of those ancient systems, whether it's Theosophy, Rosicrucians, even the Freemasons, if you will, Anthroposophy, all of those modern day mystery schools derive from that. And as I mentioned before, even the Western ancient mystery schools of Egypt and Greece and the Druids and Eastern Europe and all those things we've kind of forgotten about and no one really knows about at this point, were predominantly based on the divine feminine. Now, of course, we don't see that even now once we look into Greek mythology or Norse mythology or any of those ancient European mythologies. We don't see any of that as we have it today. Most of it is based on, patriarchal journeys and drama of the head male deities of Zeus or Odin or Jupiter, Thor, even Indra in India, but that's what we see. Those chief gods are male deities, and they're the ones running the show. So as I'm talking about the goddess, the point of this is obviously take it out of a religious context into more of a philosophical context, but connecting to Kundalini, which of course is the biggest, juiciest topic of all, as many of you are already connected to or familiar with or intrigued about, because it is a personal experience, and we'll get into that. It's an actual bioenergetic phenomenon that is being researched and studied, which is very fascinating. So what I'm trying to say is that Kundalini concept, which we'll get into and outline in detail, is connected to healing, it's connected to vitality and living, which in turn is connected to this philosophical discussion of the goddess. So it's all connected. Okay, so yin and yang. Who's not come across those terms? Good. So let me throw it out there. Yin and yang. What do we know? How do we think of when we hear those two words thrown around?
Balance.
Balance?
Yeah,
with those two.
Masculine within both is a piece of all.
So just notice the first few words you used was gender-based, masculine, and conversely feminine, right? Okay, what else?
Good and evil.
Good and evil, yeah, okay. Duality, yeah. So it's a relative concept, right? It's in relation to, is the idea. Yin in relation to something yang, yang in relation to something yin is the idea. So this was very, very developed by the Chinese, by the Taoists in ancient China, right? They're the ones that formulated this detailed philosophy of yin and yang in supreme detail. Their whole system is based on the balance of yin and yang and describing what it is, the relationship. Their worldview was based on seeing everything in terms of yin and yang. Everything has a dualistic relationship, as we've talked about. The idea of duality is our general functional way we experience reality is in duality. This and that, right? Me and you, up and down, life and death, hot and cold. Polarity, right. Polarity is the nature of functional, observable reality of the senses, right? And that's what science is trying to understand. The duality of things. Until you get to quantum physics and it gets very fuzzy, right? Then you see the wave and the particle exist at the same time. We know that now, we've proven it, but they're both existing simultaneously relative to the observer. Whoa, like who really thinks about that? Yeah, I know many of us do, right? So depending on how you look at things, that will dictate what is real to you and to maybe others, right? And so and that's what I mean by duality, relativity, duality. It's all based on that, which is the Taoist description of yin and yang. Everything is based on yin and yang. So we've described some qualities of yin and yang, obviously. Makes sense. Now, what we do though is we then apply a gender to it, obviously, right? Masculine, feminine. So when you look at the traditional description of yin versus yang, right? What is yang generally? Is it hot or cold? Hot, right. Is yang moving or still? Moving, right. So yin is still, is the idea. Yang is what's called the active principle. It's movement. Yin is the opposite. It's the grounding, still principle. You need both. Very important. You need both to actually be, to even have the active principle. You need it to begin, right? From the yin. So everyone's familiar with the yin-yang symbol, of course, right? The black and white circular symbol. Okay, well that describes, if you notice at the top, one side, one portion, half of it begins in a small point and expands into a big circle. And from there, from the bottom of the circle, you've got another beginning of the opposite color that expands, becomes full, and you keep going like that. So what that's trying to say is, one side, either being yin or yang, begins from the fullness of the other, right? Full yin births yang, which then actualizes and maximizes, which then births yin, and it keeps going, right? So the idea is they're both interconnected. You can't have one without the other. So the yang comes from stillness. Maximum stillness leads to movement. Interesting, right? It doesn't stay still. Maximum stillness creates action. Maximum action creates maximum stillness. Okay, we're going to get into kind of how that plays out with Kundalini, which is very interesting. Okay, so we're getting back to the goddess and God here. Okay, so we, like I said, we apply gender to these things, obviously. In our normal functioning, how do we describe a man in this regard? Generally speaking, where does a man fall in? Yang or yin?
Yang.
Yang. And we tend to describe a woman as yin. And in terms of how humans seem to function, right? Which is traditionally, the man goes out and works, the woman stays home, is how we kind of have this psyche, right? The woman nourishes, is the grounding influence in the family, right? Of course, the woman is working all day long at home too, but the idea is, the way we just tend to describe this culturally is, the woman is yin, and the man is yang, going out there, right? Action, activity, out in the world. The woman stays at home, is how we relatively speak of it. Well, as we expand into other concepts, that kind of falls apart. And because what's interesting is we see that, remember, it's a relative term, yin and yang. But culturally, we tend to use it as male and female. And we tend to lock it in place in our minds, which is really interesting. Right? Oh, that's a manly activity. Or that's a feminine activity. Kind of based on, the nature of how we're doing things. We'll tend to think of things that way, right? So, like I said, yang tends to be masculine, and then we say yin tends to be feminine. But then now, a lioness is very young. She's the one going out and hunting, right? A lion just hangs around and is very yin in a sense. We see it kind of flip back and forth in the animal world in a lot of different places. And of course now, humans are always flipping back and forth between those, especially in modern times. It's not as rigid, obviously, these days. And the truth of it is, as the Taoists would talk about, remember it's balance. So the way they would never call a man purely yang. Because the idea is we have both within us, male and female, obviously, and most of us know that. And the way the Taoists would describe it is, the difference between a man and a woman, in their worldview, is that the man externally displays more yang, and internally tends to be predominantly yin. Oh, interesting. And the woman is opposite. A woman externally presents as more yin. Generally speaking, mind you. And so internally would tend to present more as yang. Do we follow? So therefore, what's the general stereotype of a guy? He can be very chill. The woman's very active in the house, the dude is just sitting there, very still, very stoic.
Doing nothing.
Doing nothing, maybe, in the worst case scenario. Right? But the woman is more emotional, right?
That's what they say.
That's what they say. And the dudes aren't emotional. And that can be a good or bad thing, but we have this general stereotype in our culture. And what I'm trying to say is, the Taoists would describe that, that's an example of the yin and yang difference. The man can externalize their energy in a very yang way more easily than a woman can. Whereas, look, I know in my family, in my personal life, the joke is women think more than men. They're constantly thinking and multitasking and doing all kinds of stuff, and we have this predominant cultural worldview of that as well. But the man is very simple. Hey, I'm not thinking that deeply of things. It's kind of the idea. And that's another example. That's an example of internally the man is very yin, very still, but can externalize this yang energy, whereas the woman is very opposite. Internally, there's a lot going on. But externally, there's more yin going on. The woman's body is softer. The man's body is harder. I mean, that's kind of undeniable, is the thing. It's harder to hurt a guy than it is to hurt a woman. My kids are jumping on me constantly, and I barely feel it. They jump on my wife, and she's like, ow! It's kind of the nature of how we're constructed as a human. But then internally, we have this kind of different dynamic in the male and female, in a general sense. And in the spiritual meditative lineages, they would actually apply those principles to give different practices to men and women, which is very interesting. What do we see in most meditative stories and traditions? Who's in the monasteries? Men. Now, from our point of view, we're like, okay, that's a patriarchal thing. But wait, what I'm saying, there's something else to that. In those spiritual systems, they knew that men needed to get away. In essence. And they created that system, in essence, because spiritually speaking, in this ancient worldview, the woman is more connected to earthly cycles. Obviously. Right? Every month the woman is in tune with the moon. The man's not. Not even close to in that way. Yeah, there's some talk about men's cycles and stuff like that. But my point is, it's very obvious the woman gives birth. It's a whole different world than the man experiences, right? So the women are connected to nature, to earthly cycles, to the earth, if you will, in a whole different way physically and energetically than the man can even get to in a man's body, is the thing. And so the ancients knew that. And so the women had different ways of connecting and awakening than men did. You see? And so my point is, there's a lot to kind of how these systems developed in ancient times. And yes, there was a patriarchal undertone behind this as well. I get that. But it's a lot more complicated than what we may think in terms of. And of course, in some of the more open-minded monastic traditions, in Buddhism, there were whole monastic traditions for women, right? And the story is, I will digress a lot as I talk, I think it's fun. Well, the Buddha was only teaching men at first, early on. And of course, it's kind of a cultural thing too. Only, men would come to him, obviously, because it was easy for men to leave their families. Men would do that. Men do these things. So he was mainly, training men at first. And the few women he would turn away because he was like, no, look, that's not culturally a thing right now. I don't want to do that. So he's kind of going through his own process, kind of figuring out how to do things. After 7 years, as the story goes, remember the story for the Buddha is he left his family. He left his wife and child. His newborn, I think, the baby was a few months old. He left them and went on to his quest, and that's the story. And then he finally met them again 7 years later. It's the story. Where he goes into the court where his wife is still there as the princess, soon to be queen. The boy is 7 now, Rahula. Yashodhara was her name, the wife of Buddha. So when the story goes, she was pissed. She didn't want to see him. So Buddha, Gautama Buddha, waited in the court for a couple of weeks, I think, waiting for her just to kind of calm down enough to just be okay with seeing him. So she did. She got over it, worked through her anger. She was pissed, of course. It's very interesting, right? When we hear kind of the background of the story here. So then they finally meet. They meet in the bedroom and they talk. And he meets his son for the first time after 7 years. Imagine that. And so she eventually, very quickly, becomes a student of his. Obviously. But imagine what she's going through, right? From her point of view. And listening to who he's become and how he's changed. Of course, she realized, okay, hold on. He's got something here. Let me learn from him. So she does. She becomes his first woman student. And then she pushes him to expand the women's portion. And at first, he's like very reluctant, obviously, again. He's, part of this cultural world at that time in India. Things were kind of very rigid, obviously, these gender roles. So she convinces him to take on women. And so that's what happens. She becomes the first of the women's order in Buddhism. And it quickly expands into a massive nunnery of women meditators, is the story.
Wow.
And very quickly, she very quickly awakens under his guidance in her own right, and even it gets a little fuzzy after that, depending on kind of what you read, where you go, but allegedly she kind of created her own techniques for women, which weren't fully handed down in the tradition of Buddhist lineages, but, it's a whole different topic. Interesting. Yes?
Did they come back together in a marriage kind of way, or was
No.
they were, okay, that's interesting.
As far as you know, who knows what really happened? Maybe they did. I don't know. But
Certainly as a partnership.
as partners, for sure. Yeah.
So it was like still.
Were they intimate? The thing, and we'll talk about kind of once we get to Kundalini, because Kundalini is sexual energy, is the thing. But we'll talk about that, and when you're at the level of what we understand they were, for example, the Buddha and Yashodhara, at some point, when you're at that level of awakening and enlightenment, sex is not sex as we think anymore. Sexual energy is not how we feel it to them, to beings at that level. It's a whole different ballgame. Okay, we'll get to that, hopefully, for sure, today. But, so, getting back, to yin and yang, what's interesting now is, like I keep saying, the relativity aspect of yin and yang. the male and female fluidity of it, how we describe it, how we culturally describe it now. But look, wait a minute. The earth. How do we usually describe the spirit of the earth? Mother. Who says Father Earth? I've never heard that, right? Anywhere. It's always Mother Earth. In every pagan tradition, every indigenous tradition, it's always Mother Earth. Father Sky, Mother Earth. Okay? But wait a minute. Earth is this very yin embodiment of reality. And in many of the pagan indigenous cultures, the active principle of the earth energy is, as some would describe, Pan. Or the green man, if many of you who know the pagan traditions, right? It's a male aspect that is interacting with humans. Wait a minute. Now this is getting confusing, right? If what I was saying traditionally in the Taoist concept, the masculine principle is interacting as active. The yin principle is very grounding still. We now reverse it. We start to reverse it in certain situations now, right? Mother Earth is very yin. And the masculine principle comes out, interacts with us in nature. The principle of nature in pagan traditions embodies as its masculine energy. Right? Am I correct? Interesting, right? Okay, and wait a minute. Now if you get into the Indian worldviews. So, for some of you who has heard me speak before, and the idea from the Indian worldviews, the male and female divinity has been there from the beginning. The god and goddess. It's never been either or, is the thing of Hinduism. The basic construct of Hinduism is both, because the original essence is neither, is non-dual, is the idea. The Hindu worldview, the Vedanta worldview, if you will, for those of you familiar with these terms, the non-duality takes a central role in Hinduism. It's called Advaita philosophy, for those of you who know, okay? So the ancient Hindu worldview took the original concept and proposed what we call God as this non-dual principle. Neither feminine nor male. Very interesting. And the idea is neither. It is all there is and everything there is. And the concept of it is beyond human conception, formless, nameless, all of that. Okay, the ultimate idea where our brain melts, talking about God, is the original concept in Hinduism of the ultimate divine principle. And they termed it Brahman, is the idea. Brahman literally translates into the vastness. That's what it translates into. So what I'm saying is the original concept in ancient India of God was the vast. Okay? And then the philosophy then doesn't stop there though. Then it goes on to say, okay, but as we consider from a human point of view the ultimate principle of all things, that's when yin and yang develops. From our view, as God manifests, and we can say that from any theological point of view, God is manifesting, right? But in the Hindu point of view, they break it down even more. Once we talk about something becoming, that becoming and that original something takes on two different dual relationships now. You follow? It becomes now a yin and yang relationship. Now this is where Taoism overlays. Taoism says the same thing. Before yin and yang, there was only oneness. The Wu Ji is what they call it in Taoism. From Wu Ji, emptiness, different terms it's been described, emptiness, allness, it's all the same thing. From that comes yin and yang, is born yin and yang. The Hindus would say from that is born the active principle that manifests into all of creation and the grounding principle that birthed that. Now, in the Hindu worldview, that takes on a multitude of descriptions. One becomes male, one becomes female, one becomes female, one becomes male, and depending on how you look at it, it becomes a whole different now sect or understanding of divinity, is what now we term Hinduism, which is what makes it very complicated and makes your brain melt when you try to understand Hinduism. So the idea is, from a general Hindu point of view, the manifesting principle is the goddess, the divine feminine. We see that in Gnosticism, right? Whoever's familiar with that. In the Gnostic worldview, the divine feminine is called Sophia, right? Interesting, right? Sophia is the active principle, the one who is the universe manifesting in all things, interacting with people. Right? Now, my assertion is, and as many would agree, she became the Holy Spirit in the Christian worldview. And eventually she became a dove. Okay. Reduced down to a dove. And then relegated to, even non-existence.
Even though she is existence.
Right.
Yeah.
And so from the ancient point of view, she is existence. She is the manifesting principle, and what is manifest? Of course, is relative again. One who focuses on her as the manifesting principle will see the universe as what's manifest, and that will become now the masculine. Do you follow? It gets very blurry when you start thinking about it relatively speaking. But in the ancient systems of divinity, the manifesting principle was the divine feminine, the goddess, the Holy Spirit.
Which makes sense, because women are the creators.
Women are the creators from our understanding of what we see in reality, right? But it's a very young act.
Yeah.
Interesting now. So, I don't want to belabor that point too much. My point is, the yin-yang, male-female, creates a massive confusion when you start to really dig into it. But what's important to realize is, at the fundamental level, how the principle of creation was described, it was described as a divine principle, as a feminine principle. The creative principle being the goddess in this way. She was the mother that created all. And in Hinduism, and in certain indigenous cultures, she is described as prime creator as well. So within Hinduism now, you've got goddess sects who take her to be not just the manifesting principle, but also prime creator, the source as well. Which is very interesting. It's called Shakti. Shaktiism in Hinduism. Hinduism has three prime tracks, if you will, that developed over thousands of years. Focusing on God as the divine feminine only, as Shakti. Focusing on God as a divine masculine, Shiva or Vishnu, with divine feminine counterparts. And it gets very funny when you read, because each of those three tracks have their own body of work, have their own scripture and sacred writings that they kind of refer back to, and their own proponents and master level teachers and different practices based on these different tracks. But to get you to the same place is the thing. And so if you start debating with any one of these people in one of these tracks, they'll eventually say, oh no, it doesn't matter. We do it because we like it. We prefer this tract. And a true Hindu will say that. We prefer this tract. Oh, I prefer this tract. Oh, cool. No big deal. There's no fighting. And if you ever see two Hindus fighting, they don't really understand what they're talking about, usually. They're a little too attached to things they shouldn't be. as we see that in modern religious sense, you know. And so the idea is, the Hindu worldview, the ancient Indian worldview was, it doesn't matter how you see God at all, or what gender you apply to God. If you do, you don't have to, is the thing. You can apply a form to God, but you don't have to. You can apply a name to God, but you don't have to. You don't even have to think of God, is really also there. You don't have to spend a thought about the God concept if you don't want to. Really interesting, right?
Choice.
It's a choice. And so, you know, from the Hindu point of view, the Buddha is an example of taking that tract. Because people will come to him and go, tell me about God. Who's right? Is God a man or a woman? Or is God Shiva or Vishnu? Or Durga? Tell me. The Buddha would never answer. In all the Buddha's texts, when there's reference and talk about, oh, the Buddha was asked about God, or asked about spirit, or asked about afterlife, or asked about this or that, some metaphysical concept, publicly, he would refuse to answer every time. The answer was silence. He would just look at them and smile. And eventually say, all I teach is how to end suffering. If you do that and meditate the way I taught you, you'll find your answers. That's it. That's all he said every time. That's consistency, right? I mean,
The answer is probably different for each person.
exactly. And he knew that. That's the point. You know, he grew up in a Hindu worldview, right? So that was his foundation. But he took the tract of not focusing on anything divine. Very interesting, right? But that's a whole different topic that I've talked about before. We're not going to get into that. But so now the point is, this idea of the goddess, as I talk about. So, in the spiritual practices of the world, in the religious practices of the world, as you start to, if you're doing any authentic spiritual practice, and what I mean by authentic is something that really starts to transform you, to make you a better person. It's really the point of any spiritual tradition. If it's not making you a better person, it's kind of pointless. It's doing something else for you, right? It may be something else, community, or keeping you on track with something else. But the essence of a true, authentic spiritual lineage is it's meant to transform you into something you're not, is how it's always been. And what I mean by that, as I've said before, who we think of ourselves as a mind, body, thought, physical complex is just a small portion of who we really are. That's the whole spiritual thrust of things, right? To become greater than what you are. And that greater than can be a relative thing, but the idea is the greater than is something divine, something you're not experiencing now. And every religion talks about it in that way, but they'll give it its own nuance. Even Christianity, it's you trying to connect to something greater in its simplest sense. And how they do it kind of defines different tracks and sects of Christianity and Catholicism, and every religion in essence. They'll go to a certain point and they'll usually stop. But in the ancient worldview, the whole tract has always been laid out. You can get to certain stages and stop if you want, but you can keep going. What does that mean, keep going? And that's what's been laid out in some of the most ancient, authentic lineages. If you keep going, here's what happens. You will change. You will start to function differently and not be enslaved by your thoughts and feelings and sensations. Oh, right? That's the whole point of the Buddha, the end to suffering. His whole point was, we are constantly suffering, and he defined that by how we're improperly attaching and reacting to our own thoughts and feelings continuously. All day long, the thoughts and sensations we're generating, we improperly handle them. And he defined what that improper handling is. Aversion and craving is the philosophy of it, right? We then hook onto those and we think those are real. Our own thoughts are always real, and we react to them as that. And that leads us often to roads we don't want to. Hence, the definition of suffering from his point of view. We're always chasing happiness. We're always chasing peace. We're always chasing love. These great exalted things we're always chasing in our lives, right? But they don't last. Obviously. They go away, they come back, they go away, they come back. We try to keep recreating them. We try to keep holding on to them. But they don't last, obviously. And that was his basic message. You're mistaking reality for what it really is. And he developed a way to kind of see reality clearly, not get hooked on to what we're mistaking it for, this relative and permanent, transient fluctuation of subatomic particles around us constantly that we think is real. And it seems very real to us. And even inside, everything seems so real, everything we're feeling and thinking and all the time. But it's really not. And so most spiritual traditions would keep trying to remind us, okay, there's something more to us, guys. There's something more. There's a soul. Oh, okay, cool, there's a soul. What is the soul? Okay, we have different definitions, depending on when you're born, where you're born in the world, and who your parents are. Different definitions. Okay, but there's something beyond this mind and body is the soul. Okay, and that becomes the usual spiritual journey, right? Trying to understand what is that soul, or making that soul into something, or connecting to that soul, and what that soul connects to, and the whole journey. So, what I'm trying to say is, as we stay on a spiritual journey, we start experiencing things that are not normal, as most people call normal, okay? And especially if you're meditating, you start experiencing things that you typically don't. You start experiencing yourself in different ways. So, this is where the concept of Kundalini comes in, okay? Kundalini, the term itself, simply means a energy that is lying dormant, that uncoils. Basic idea is that. Kundalini. Kunda is a Sanskrit word that generally means a something that's coiled and contained, which relatively means it can uncoil, right? But something that's been kind of brought and contained and held together is the idea, which can then be uncoiled, if you know how, is the understanding. And then Kundalini is now the concept of this uncoiling energy that happens. And then traditionally, then, it's talked about as a uncoiling serpent, snake-like energy that arises within you is now how it becomes talked about in the Eastern sense. And then modern day, when we say Kundalini, most people know it as like coiled serpent. This is what it's become, is the idea, right? And then you see pictures of it everywhere. The caduceus. Who has not seen a caduceus? Or not know what I'm talking about, right? The medical symbol.
Oh, right.
Think of the medical symbol, which technically is kind of a bastardized half caduceus, is the thing.
They have the Hermes caduceus on some of the hospitals.
Some, yeah.
But the other one is Asclepius.
Some, yeah, but they usually show one snake.
Yeah, the single one is
Sometimes, yeah.
Asclepius.
Yeah. So that symbol of the staff and the snake is an ancient symbol. And like she was saying, even in Greek mythology, they used it. It was there. Asclepius was the ancient Greek god of, there were two god divinities of healing in Greek mythology, right? Asclepius and Hygeia, for those who are interested, right? So Hygeia was the feminine, more healing energy, where Asclepius was the more masculine intervention, intervening, active. Again, yin and yang. Interesting, right? So the point is, also we have Hermes' staff. Hermes and Apollo's staff is also connected to the caduceus. He would carry it around. So what we're talking about in most of the depictions is this rod, this staff, this straight rod, and around it you've got these two snake-like depictions with the tails at the bottom and the heads at the top, right? Everyone has seen that? And the two snakes then coil around this central staff with the heads meeting, and then usually you'll see kind of wings at the top coming out near the heads, right? Okay, what is that?
It's the spine.
The Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna.
Ooh, complicated words now. Who does not know the terms Ida Pingala? Great. Okay, so backing up, we have that depiction. The central rod, these two intertwining snakes, and then these wings at the top. Okay. Ancient symbolism. Ancient. Because the whole world knew this at that time, in the ancient world. So, okay, what does it mean? Now, the meaning now, we have to now, again, go back to the Indian subcontinent, because they specialized in this, and what they brought forth and outlined and kept, we still have to a great extent. And this is why I fall back, just so you guys know, yes, I am biased. I am Indian. And I have deep, familiarity with India. But India, the subcontinent of India, became the spiritual storehouse for most of humanity in our current age, especially after the last ice age, what people will know as the Younger Dryas, 12,000, 10,000 BC. There was a massive period on the earth where things changed, for those of you who are into that, right? That's when the ice age ended, civilization as we know it disappeared, reset, and then it evolved again to what we have now, in essence. And so we even talk about civilization starting around 5,000, 4,000, 3,000 BC, for those of you growing up in the 80s and 90s. But now we know that it goes back even further, 8,000, 9,000, Göbekli Tepe, 10,000, 12,000 BC, all these things. So the point is, India was able to retain some of the ancient spiritual storehouse of the planet in their, the way they codified their knowledge, and by the people who codified them and kept things intact in the traditions of Hinduism, Buddhism, even in Taoism, in the Tibetan plateau with the Tibetans. They were able to retain a lot of this ancient information that the whole world had, is the thing. So you've got to go back to there to really understand what I'm talking about, to the idea of Kundalini, which is the central point of spirituality, is the thing that a lot of people don't realize. Eventually they do once they get into things like this, but you can't escape the phenomenon of Kundalini, is the thing. No matter what you do. Because now, to describe what we're talking about here, getting back to the symbolism, this symbolism is based on what's called the esoteric anatomy, the energetic anatomy of the human. Is kind of how it's been described in the most ancient Kundalini Tantric energetic-based writings we have from the Indian subcontinent. And so the general, thesis is that there's a central channel. We have energy bodies, right? We have a flow of energy moving through us, as described as channels. And this, I assume, is not new to most of you. The Taoists and the Chinese really focused on this in terms of Chinese medicine, modern day acupuncture, and the meridian concept, right? Indians also had it in their own way. They called it the nadis. The nadis are the channels. Many cultures had it. But the Indians and the Chinese hyper-specialized in this in specific ways. The Chinese focused on this thing in terms of healing and cultivating the energy directly. The Indians focused on it in a slightly different way, but the idea of channels has been there. These channels that are circulating this energy through us that we can't really see or dissect. But there's interesting stuff coming out where they're finding the fascia in our body are laid out in tracks. Okay, the fascia is what connects all our musculature, internal organs. Okay, it's type of connective tissue. It's in between all things, but it's laid out in tracks in our body. And they're finding that many of the classical meridians follow what they're finding as some of these tracks of fascia, which is very interesting. But I digress. But the idea is we have these layers of multidimensional bodies to us, and as if you're in the yoga world or in that idea, you've come across this idea where we are made up of multiple layers of being: the physical, the energetic, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual. There are different models out there based on kind of where you go, okay, what you read. But the idea is, beyond the physical here and now, the five senses, there's an energetic body we hold, okay? Which becomes very apparent to a lot of us, but the energetic body is what really awakens in dream time, okay? That's what we're interacting and feeling when we use intuition and subtle senses and all these things, energy work, all these things we're familiar with now. So the energy body has an anatomy. There are channels, just like the physical body. Within the energy anatomy, there are certain channels that are most important, is the idea. The most important is this central channel that corresponds to our spine. Just as the spine and the spinal cord is, in essence, the most important part of our being, correct? It's all about the spine. It's all about the spinal cord, and hence all about the nervous system in the brain and the spinal cord. So energetically, the idea is there is a central channel energetically corresponding to the spinal cord. That's that central rod in the symbolism. Okay? In the Indian worldview, it's called Shushumna. In the Taoist worldview, it's called the Tai Chi Po. So different cultures have different names for it. A central rod that, in most humans, is asleep, is dormant, is quiet, is turned off. Nothing's there. It's just empty and hollow. That's how it's described. Around that central channel, you have two sets of channels. We're getting a little nitty-gritty, but it's, for some of you, it's kind of fun to know, but it kind of pulls things together. The Ida and Pingala channel are these two channels described in the Hindu-based understanding. The two channels that curl around and wind around the central channel is called the Ida and Pingala. Generally speaking, the male and female channel, the yin and yang channel. You see? Those two channels are what is active in most humans. There's energy coursing through it. And it's usually an imbalanced energy. And that's how they would talk about it in terms of the balance of energy from this point of view, in terms of the channels. When we talk about your imbalance, either male or female wise, they would say it's showing up in your male and female channel as an imbalance. There's more or less energy running through one of those channels, is the idea, right? So it's coursing around. Every time the channel comes back and connects, that's where we have a traditional chakra. The correct pronunciation is chakra, not chakra. Just so you know. Okay? So, chakra means wheel, vortex. Every time the Eden Pingala come and connect, that's where a chakra is depicted or described, is the idea. There are 5 connections that happens. 5 times the Eden Pingala come together. Those have to do with the 5 predominant chakras here. Here, 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 here. There's one below where it starts and one above, making 7, traditional 7 chakras in Hindu energetic concepts. Other cultures would describe them a little bit differently. Maybe 3, maybe 5, maybe more, right? Just so we're clear. It's the same idea. So, these 2 channels are what we're mainly dealing with, but that's describing, those are the 2 snakes. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, why are they snakes meeting with their heads up there? With wings up? So now the idea is, like I said, the central channel is quiet and dormant, turned off. The philosophy is, as we heal, as we increase our vitality, as we work on our trauma, clear our stuff, clear our toxins, work through our issues, we gain access to more vitality. Where this goes is, eventually, as you connect spiritually to divine energy, we'll connect this in a minute, but divine energy, that eventually translates into energy finally being able to go and enter the central channel. That's the idea of Kundalini. It has to get into the central channel. The idea is there's a gate at the bottom of the tube that's closed off in all humans, usually. It stays closed off for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime until it eventually opens. Enough pressure is gathered here, enough energy, enough healing is done that opens the gate, which only happens after the Eden Pingala, the male and female channel, are balanced. Very interesting. You have to balance first. Once they're balanced, then the central channel awakens and energy can enter there. That is what's called true Kundalini awakening in the classical sense. And that's a big deal, as how they talk. That is like a massive human achievement, is how they talk about it in the spiritual realms. Like massive. It's like going from being a kid to an adult, in our sense. How different it is. So, it's also rare, is the point, for most of humanity. And so the idea is, once the central channel opens, energy can rise. And the 2 side channels get fully balanced. That rising feels like a snake, like a cobra waking up. And hence the symbolism. You see? It's like a rising snake. It uncoils and rises. That's how they draw it, describe it, talk about it in the Eastern religious sense.
Does the significance of the 7 cobras represent the 7 chakras?
It can, yes. And that specific symbolism you find in certain Hindu places. Yes?
I'm having trouble with this central channel that you say is our spinal cord and our spine. That's actually, as I hear you, it's lying dormant until all these other energies, until we open that channel. How could something that is the centralness of our being be so dormant and so nothing?
I know, right?
Seems like it's by design.
You know, I thought you were gonna
It's
say that.
it's a paradox.
Is it the energetic channel that goes through the spinal column? Because obviously we're moving around and we have to be able
The
to
spinal
move around.
column is a physical manifestation of the energetic channel.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we can't
So
dissect and
the
find the
other-
energetic channel.
The other is part of your energetic body.
It's all part of the energetic body.
Right.
But it's kind of like how we talk about in modern day terms, we're only using 5% of our brain.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same thing.
But it's not part of your, I mean, it's not something that we can see or,
Relatively speaking, those who can see it can see it. You know, it's not, most
Right.
humans can't see it. It's not a physical thing to
It's-
see.
yeah.
With
it's
our
not
physical
that-
eyes.
What I'm saying is that
Yeah.
you wouldn't see it in most medical studies.
None.
That's
No.
what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's not something to pull out and like look at. Oh, look what I found. We can't do that,
Right.
yeah.
right? We can't, even the meridians, they're trying like crazy to find them, right? And
Right.
like I said, they're finding traces of them. They're
Well, we
finding
know
indirect
that it's-
references to them,
Yeah.
like in the fascial tracts. And there's more, like for example, there's less electrical resistance on acupuncture points, right?
Right.
Which we know for a fact. And so
Right.
they correspond. And so we know they're,
We know they exist, yeah,
we're finding references to these meridians in different ways.
right,
But we can't pull out a meridian and go, oh, look what I found. Here it is.
right.
It's not like that. And because it's based on this model that it's not in the physical body. Because these different bodies we have, like a Russian doll layered on top of each other, are all part of our being and real. But we can't interface directly with them until we know how. And so our senses can only pick up what our senses are tuning into.
Right,
So most five senses tune into the physical body only.
right.
You see?
No, I get it, yeah.
Yeah. So the central channel is the idea. And the reality is, look, physically there is no central channel. But the idea is the central channel and even the chakras, the truth is these are models of understanding this process humans go through. You see? So it's been described that even the Ida and Pingala is this model of energy anatomy that's been laid out that makes sense to describe the male and female principle in us that has to balance. You follow?
And
So-
it's even symbolized, it even symbolizes medicine. I
Well,
mean,
medicine has eventually taken it, yeah, you know, because,
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is that if there's enough substantiation of it, that it's evolved it's a recognition, to me.
it's real enough that the medical system can't get rid of it. It's in their symbolism,
Right, that's my point, yeah.
and they don't realize it.
Right, right. So that,
Yeah.
I just find that interesting, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sharing this to kind of give you the understanding of it. Now, and then after it, okay, how can this be? Why so? Yeah, that's all like debate and speculation, right? And so the idea is, once the energy rises like a coiled serpent, is what it feels like, is when it unfurls and uncoils and rises, it kind of feels like that to many people. And hence the symbolism of something rising. And in the Christian world, they would talk about it as the Holy Spirit rising up my spine. If you read some of the works of the Catholic mystics, that's what they say. They don't talk about serpents, right? They don't want to, they talk about it in terms of Holy Spirit rising. Yes?
So Buddha had the jhanas, right? Are those his way of describing Kundalini, or is the jhanas
No,
like a different
those are completely
thing?
separate.
It's a completely separate
Yeah,
thing. Okay.
they're related. Jhanas are a Buddhist term for samadhi. Samadhi is a term for high-level meditative stages that one experiences. The first samadhi, the first high level meditative stage, is connected to Kundalini, because
Okay.
you can't have first samadhi without Kundalini awakening.
Because it's a similar energy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Everyone who's authentically attained first jhana or first samadhi has had a Kundalini awakening.
Oh,
Because as I'll talk about, some of the signs of Kundalini awakening, and that'll make sense
okay.
once I get to some of the signs and symptoms of it. Okay? So, if this rising energy happens, and it symbolizes as two snakes, and once it rises as it rises, Kundalini is a purifying energy. It burns and cleans and clears, is how it's described. It's fiery. It's a fire element, is also how it's described in different traditions. Okay? Yes?
I have a question. Can the Kundalini energy come and go? So like you have an awakening and you have it for a month, and then all of a sudden you go out of balance and then it coils back up.
Good question. I'll talk about that when that happens, because that does happen. That phenomenon happens, but what is that phenomenon is the question.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'll talk about it exactly, because that's an important thing for all of us, because we're going through weird stuff like that often. What we do, even if we don't realize it, even normal people are. So what's interesting is the thing, because this idea is Kundalini is
That's all.
A
all
muggle.
open to interpretation. What's that?
yeah.
You don't
Every
know.
muggle is going through this
Yes.
as well. They don't realize it.
No.
Harry Potter term,
Love
right?
Dormy.
So, as the fiery cleansing energy awakens and arises, it heals us further and transforms us until eventually it gets to the crown chakra. That's why the snakes meet there. And once it arises and attains that state, we have enlightenment. That's the gist of it. And the wings unfurled and you're free.
Mm.
That's what it symbolizes. You
That's
see?
interesting.
Yes.
No, I can
Now.
totally see that, yeah.
How does that happen?
You go
When
through
does it
that.
happen? And how much of that is how it happens? Is the thing. So we have the symbolism that's been handed down. Now, what are we really talking about here? Is the question. And that's what I really kind of want to lay out. To connect it back to the goddess is the thing. So, before I get into that, I want to mention how this phenomenon, because it's a phenomenon that is talked about everywhere, but they interpret it differently. Okay? What's interesting is, in the Christian world, Christian Islamic Judaic world, how do they interpret this phenomenon? And they do.
It's falling of the Holy Spirit.
Take away Holy Spirit.
Oh, okay.
Not even talking about Holy Spirit. To most modern day Christians, specifically Protestants, how do they interpret phenomenon that we're talking about?
Like miracles?
Yeah, no.
Oh,
What's evil?
Evil,
Oh.
oh, evil.
demonic.
Oh, that.
Can I say something? real
Yes.
quick? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I connected something when you were talking a minute ago when you said the Holy Spirit rising up the spine, because I'd never heard that before. But you have the Holy Spirit rising up. Sophia became the Holy Spirit, and Sophia is wisdom, and the serpent represents wisdom.
Exactly.
It's really,
Yeah.
it's good.
The serpent represented something good in the whole ancient world until Christianity developed.
Yeah.
Until the symbolism of the Garden of Eden was formulated. And the snake was thrust in as
The bad guy.
the bad guy.
The really bad guy.
To the rest of the world, that was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that?
Dumbing everybody down. Yep, that's what it is, yeah.
But that's a whole different topic.
They're saying wisdom is bad.
That's a massive rabbit hole. We don't have time for it.
Can you,
Well, we can be controlled more if we don't have the wisdom of people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good. And I get that you guys want to go down that rabbit hole, but let's not do that. Because we usually, it's a slippery slope we can quickly go down right now. Let's not.
Bring it back in.
We'll sidetrack like crazy.
Could you talk a little about the Nagas?
The Nagas, well, it's a short little sidetrack. I can talk about that quickly. The Nagas are the Eastern term for snake-like beings. So in ancient India, in ancient China, in the whole Asian world, right, the Naga beings were a major component of their mythology and their understanding of things. The serpent beings were the Nagas. Okay, so half serpent, half human, full serpent, sentient serpent, dragon falls under Naga. You know, the Chinese focused on Nagas as dragons primarily, where the Indians focused on Nagas more as like, oftentimes non-dragon-like beings, more hybrid, shape-shifting human, snake, reptilian beings, right? So that's the term for Naga. And in the Indian mythologies, they're fully interacting with the Nagas continuously.
What is it?
Naga, N-A-G-A,
What is?
serpent being,
Reptilian.
reptilian serpent being.
So good, bad?
Both. They're just other inhabitants of the earth called Nagas.
Jinn.
Just like humans.
Oh,
Jinns are not always Nagas, but jinns are more of an Islamic version of a different type of sentient being.
Yeah.
It could be a lot of things. Jinn is a generic term.
Catch-all, right?
It's a catch-all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of like what we call like fairy now, or
Do these
Elemental.
beings like walk among us?
so in the Indian mythologies, yes, the Nagas walked among us. They had their own kingdoms. They had their own kings. They would intermarry and intermix with humans. Naga-human hybrids.
What do you think even still today?
All kinds of stuff.
Like in ship days?
And that's a huge rabbit hole that
Yeah,
we cannot
I
go
already-
down
I know
because
some,
that
so.
is endless. Because that pulls in reptilians, it pulls in,
Yeah.
you know,
Which means yes.
all kinds of stuff. But I really want to go down
Another time.
both of
Another
those
time.
rabbit holes,
Another time.
Garden of Eden and Nagas. But we cannot.
Not today.
Maybe next time or a future one.
There's a lot of secrets hidden in plain sight.
But the Yoga Sutras, everyone knows about the Yoga Sutras
Right.
that they teach in yoga, teacher training. Yoga Sutras were written by Patanjali, was the alleged author. He was handed that by a Naga, is the story. He was handed that. He entered the Naga realms and was given that, the Yoga Sutras, which he then transcribed and brought back. As an example of how intimately interconnected the Nagas were with Indian mythology and understanding. Oh man, I want to go down the rabbit hole so bad, but I won't. But it's okay, so getting back to Kundalini.
right.
Because, like I'm saying, in the Christian worldview, this phenomenon is very real. The Quakers and Shakers were manifesting Kundalini phenomena in what they did. That's what they're doing. When they get into those trance-like states and shaking, that's what they're doing. You see, they're awakening, and that's not true Kundalini in what I'm talking about. They're awakening and activating some energy in them that, in their words, they're letting the Holy Spirit take them over, correct? And the Holy Spirit is moving them. What is that saying? They're saying that something else is taking me over, correct? Okay, so many evangelicals and other Christians will then take a negative view of that and say, oh,
It's demons.
that's demons taking you over, right? Don't practice yoga because that will bring demons into you. It's a very common thing. Okay? That's a whole rabbit hole too. So, but what does the East say? You read the Kundalini writings, they say the same thing. Something comes in and takes you over. Oh, wait a minute. But what in the next sentence in the East, what then would they say? The goddess is coming in and taking you over. You see? Something enters you,
Which is the Holy Spirit.
which is the Holy Spirit. What this truly means is that storehouse of energy uncoils in us. When it does, it feels like something is doing it to us. That's the thing. Because we're not controlling it usually. We can't usually, and if you try to, you kind of mess things up. But usually it feels like something is happening to us. You follow? It feels something like something external is moving us, making us feel this way, bringing this up, and it throws you off. It's very disconcerting at first. And if you're not clear and grounded as to kind of the understanding of it, it can quickly take you down a dark road. And you can start interpreting it very differently. And that's what ends up happening. In the Islamic world, a jinn is taking me over. In the Christian world, Satan is taking me over. But in the ancient world, it was, no. The goddess is taking you over. The goddess is awakening inside of you. They wouldn't say taking you over, really. They would say, the goddess has awakened in you. In other words, your divine aspect is starting to awaken. In other words, the part of you that you've never been really connected to, now you're starting to awaken and connect to. In your body is the thing. Not just a mental thing, right? Not just having a ecstatic mental experience, but physically something is shifting is what happens. That's what Kundalini is. It's a physical, energetic, mental, spiritual phenomenon. That's what I'm trying to say. You see?
You look real proud of that.
Is that like, I think it's a Pentecostal church when they go into like those trances.
That's what they're doing, yeah.
And
Now,
it's like the Holy Spirit is taking me over type of thing.
that's what they're saying.
Mhm.
Now, I will add, traditionally, if you were to practice this, you need to train to have something take you over. The ancient oracles of the ancient world, right? Like when you watch Greek mythology movies, the oracle comes, right? Or in Tibetan movies, the oracle comes and gives you information. They get taken over, but that's their profession. They're trained as an oracle. That's what they're doing all day long. They're training themselves to go into clear trance-like states, right? The native shaman can go into a trance-like state and bring forth information. They're training, that's their livelihood. The people at churches aren't training anything. You see what I mean? So that's something I wouldn't recommend from that point of view, because right now, and this kind of expands into now the whole energetic worldview that, okay, we have energy bodies that actually are part of an energy world. You see? An energy world that is inhabited by energetic beings who may not all be physical. You follow, guys? So, we are constantly interacting unknowingly with denizens from these other parallel dimensions and worlds.
Define denizens.
Residents,
Oh.
people who live there, beings,
Okay.
sentient beings, sentient consciousness,
Okay.
who are part of different aspects of reality that we're not tuned into. You see? But we're interacting all the time, whether it's an ancestor or an actual guide, or even your higher self, is how we talk about it now, right? But
So a lot of
ghosts,
a lot of
those things,
times that's like the still small voice that you hear.
sometimes those small voices are your guide speaking. Or it could be literally somebody whispering into your ear next to you that you don't see.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, well, yeah, if
Yeah.
they're whispering in my ear,
And
I would probably know that.
the typical symbolism of the angel and devil, that symbolizes many things at many levels, right? And one hand it symbolizes our shadow, and our higher self internally. Yes. But it's also symbolizing actual beings who are trying to influence us all day long, who have their own agendas. Good or bad? Good and bad.
It's like Google algorithm.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
So the point is, it's not the people who have ecstatic trance-like states as part of their traditions from ancient authentic lineages do not ever advocate going into trance-like stages for fun. You see? So to get back to your question, yeah, they're probably channeling something if they're not faking it. The ones who are authentically channeling something are probably channeling something. I don't know if it's the Holy Spirit. They're always channeling, honestly speaking, is what, to get back to your question, right? But that's what they're doing, yeah. And they're not really activating Kundalini, though, is the thing. Now, and this, as I keep talking, you'll get more clarity as to what I'm saying, right? So the idea is, now, it feels like something is happening to you, okay? Because it starts to awaken energy within you that's already there. So I'm saying there's like coiled energy here, okay? What does that really mean? Now, this is where the Taoists specialized in describing that, okay? Pulling that thread in now. And what they would talk about is, there's another set of channels called a microcosmic orbit that runs up the back and the front along the spine. Doesn't really intertwine like the Ida and Pingala. There's another set. This set, the acupuncturists know well. It's called the governing vessel and conception vessel. The Du and the Ren channel. Okay? One goes up the back, one goes up the front, is the idea in acupuncture. And they treat it.
Spine.
They treat points. No, along your body.
Oh, along your body.
Yeah, channels that run along the spine, up the back, and the front.
Okay.
Okay? And they're classical acupuncture channels. And they deal with that. So, and those are active in everyone. Now the Taoist said, once you start to heal and awaken energy, those two channels change their nature. They change their flow. Because usually, both channels are running up. Because, just as an aside, remember the meridians are all connected. The 12 meridians in classical Chinese medicine, they're all connected. It's one big channel. It's one big river running through you, is the idea. You see? They talk about it as 12 meridians to segment it off and describe them. Follow? But they're all connected in one big channel. You follow? Okay, so generally, energy runs up the spine, comes up the front, and from here it dips in and connects to the next channel. Runs through, eventually it connects up here, runs up the front, gets to here, and this front channel then dips down, connects to the next channel, is how it goes. Once you start to really heal and work on yourself, what will happen is, and especially if you start doing meditative practices or energy-based practices, things like that, the front and back channel start to connect. They don't usually directly connect. They start to connect. Here. Okay? This is why in most meditation traditions they have you touch your tongue to the roof of your mouth. Right? Who's done that? Who knows that? Yeah. This is why. In yoga they push that. In Taoist yoga they push that. Because that mechanical thing you're doing is literally connecting the two channels now. On purpose. Because they know from the ancients, that's what they did, so they keep trying to copy them, because it worked. And they know if you do that, that will connect the front and back channel, which will then cause a downward flow in the front channel to occur and create an orbit with the back and front channel then.
So it's the same idea as like mudras, how you create different channels in your body to call on different things?
That's different. That's different. That's a different application to induce different energetic states. Yeah. And certain mudras will activate certain channels depending on if you know how in your hands. But this is not just a channel activation. This is a channel reconnection that happens. That usually, again, isn't happening in most people.
So, then why wouldn't it be an activation?
Because you're redirecting a flow, is the thing. In most people, the energy is running up the front and up the back.
Right.
In classical Chinese medicine, it's running up, okay? In the microcosmic orbit, it runs up the back and then starts running down the front.
Okay.
You see? And reconnects the bottom to the back channel again and creates this loop. That loop isn't happening for most people. It's a one-way direction. You follow?
That's completely separate from the Kundalini.
It's part of the pre-Kundalini phenomena.
Okay. but-
It's not true classical Kundalini, but it's the beginning stage that happens whether you know it or not that leads to Kundalini.
Okay.
You see? Because
Yeah.
as this orbit starts to awaken and flow, that's what the microcosmic orbit is, and people who are into that know that, and that's what they're doing. That's what Taoist yoga begins with that. They really focus a lot on that, how to activate the microcosmic orbit. And what it's based on is the chi is flowing through us, through these channels constantly, based on your breath. With every breath you take, the chi moves along a little bit. Toot. Another breath. Toot. Actually goes kind of slow in most people. You breathe again. Toot. It moves along. Okay? It's not like the blood pumping so quickly with the heart, right? The breath moving pumps it just a little bit. Toot. Toot. Okay? With every breath. That's how slow it goes. And so when the microcosmic orbit awakens, it starts going fast now. The chi starts flowing faster in your body, especially along this channel. Okay? So, energy is starting to move now, is what's happening, which can show up in a lot of ways. And what I'm saying is, this happens even if you don't realize it, is the thing. Okay? And I don't want to get further nitty gritty into this because that's not the point. The point is now, this microcosmic orbit starts to awaken, which increases the flow of your chi, which then has the effect of opening and clearing the first three chakras. And in Taoism, they talk about the lower dantian, this area of the body, which is crucial, right, to all of us. Like I said, the first three chakras correspond to the lower dantian, right? Which means, what are the first three chakras deal with? All our basic issues. Money, relationships, sexuality, family, all this basic stuff we're trying to deal with at a fundamental level resonate and correspond to the first three chakras, which means we store so much of our trauma here, right? And these organ systems obviously are our major organ systems here. Crucial. It's all about this area in basic healing and in basic spirituality. That's the thing. You have to start here if you really want to really get to Kundalini awakening. Because as the microcosmic orbit starts to flow and awaken, this area starts to gather energy here. When you heal, what are you healing? When we say that, what do we mean when we heal, right? From this energetic model, what's happening? It means some charged energy has discharged and neutralized. And we talk about psychologically, we kind of understand that. We let go of a charged emotion, right? We have this charged emotion from some trauma event or something we're carrying. It affects us constantly. We get triggered by it. And if you can heal it, work on it, balance it, you lose the charge behind it. right? You follow? And we call that healing in a sense, psychological healing. It's the same idea. We discharge it. You follow? So that heavy anger eventually discharges into neutral chi. Doesn't go anywhere. It just discharges. You don't feel it as anger anymore. Now it's something else. That may feel like something or not, but it's still there as this other neutral energy. Follow? This neutral chi is how they would talk about it. That's fundamentally healing from this point of view. You see? Where does that neutral energy go? It starts to gather here, is the idea. You see? It starts to gather here. The more you heal, the more you discharge your traumas, your toxins, your tensions, the big 3 T's, the more you work on those big 3 T's and discharge them in real healing, it gathers that healed energy here in your lower dantian. That's why they talk about it like that. Because you're clearing your first 3 chakras, right? From the chakra point of view. So more energy is flowing through your chakras. So it's more energy here. You see? Once you gather enough energy here, then the gate opens at the bottom of the tube. You see, that's how it works. Only then does the gate open. And the gate will open also once the 2 other spinal channels we talked about at first come to a healthy balance. You follow? So in the esoteric Eastern traditions, they would talk about it as the marriage of the male and female. The marriage of Shiva and Shakti. The divine marriage. And you see that concept, right, in a lot of places. That's what they're referring to. When the male and female finally integrate into oneness, that allows the 2 spinal channels to then open into the oneness of the central channel.
The divine androgyne is another.
The divine what?
Androgyne.
Yes, right, exactly. Because that is our true fundamental nature, is the idea. We're not male or female, is the thing. We're both and neither. So that's when Kundalini starts to truly awaken, and that's a big deal. Each part of this way is a big deal, but once the central channel awakens, it's the super big deal of being human, is how they talk about it. Now, what do we notice that tells us these things? Back to some of the questions, okay? So, kind of working backwards. Classical Kundalini awakening where the central channel opens and energy rises is always marked by stopping of breathing. You stop breathing. And some of you have kind of maybe delved into kind of meditative traditions. We'll talk about this. The breath gets so still and quiet, the breath ceases. Pure stillness occurs. Now, the breath can only cease if the mind is quiet. You see now how it's connected? If the mind is not quiet, your breath won't cease.
Yeah.
That's how they talk about it. And that's why they talk about the empty mind and still mind is the big goal. That's why. That's what you're trying to get to. But you can't force that again. That's a different rabbit hole of meditation. How to meditate, which you're not going to talk about here. But the idea is the breath will stop. It's not truly stopping, but it feels like you're not breathing. Okay? That's classical Kundalini awakening. Along with that, especially if you're doing a meditative tradition, internally you'll see a light. Very interesting, they talk about it. Anywhere you go, a light appears, an internal light, an illumination. They describe it differently. And it's usually kind of a white light, bright light, something golden, some type of light. And in the meditative traditions, especially in the
That you
Buddhist Theravada
personally
traditions,
see?
what's that?
That you personally see?
Inside, yeah.
Yeah.
Suddenly everything gets bright. Okay? And at first it kind of comes and flickers, goes away and moves around, but the goal is you want to stabilize it and, keep it there. But the point point is, it's a common thing to experience in a very hardcore meditative tradition, is the thing. They specifically talk about it. And they know, and they will say, oh, you see the light? Oh, good, you're making progress. Is how they would talk about it. But that's a typical sign, along with the ceasing of the breath, that if that happens, you know, oh, whoa, I'm on track. I'm doing good. I'm making progress with what I'm trying to do. And then the whole goal is about stabilizing that experience and phenomenon. Before that, just briefly mentioning, if that occurs, and it doesn't always have to occur for everyone, the light doesn't always appear. Sometimes it's a sound. There's usually a unifying sensory component to this. So for usually people visually oriented, or they're part of a meditative tradition who are kind of emphasizing this, so it's in your mind, so kind of the placebo effect kicks in and you're kind of expecting that, you'll see the light. But for some people it's a sound. And for the mantra-based practitioners or some of those traditions, a sound appears where it's like this, and in the Christian world they'll talk about it as like angel singing, the choir of angels. That's what they're referring to in the Bible when they say that. They're experiencing the divine sound. You see? That's what starts to happen. This amazing, beautiful tone or sound-like element comes and stays. They call it the Nada Brahman in Hinduism, but it's this divine quality. Just like the light becomes like this divine light, permeating everything and just engulfs you. Same thing with the sound. It can be like that. So, some people it's neither. Which makes it very confusing, okay? For some people, it's none of those, unfortunately. It just depends, it's none of those. It's nothing extraordinary like that. It could just simply be this utter peace and tranquility sets in. So, and then further stages of bliss and awakening happen. But the point is, even before that, what is happening? You will feel the energy traversing through your body, is how it starts to happen. Especially in meditation, those spontaneous movements, many of you have had either in meditation or practicing yoga or even dancing ecstatically, spontaneous movements that start to occur. That's what that is. It's chi opening in your channels. That's all it is. In healing work, body work, it's often very common having spontaneous movements, right? It's like something's moving you and you're not. And you can stop it if you want to. But if you don't stop it, it can just keep happening. Who's had that experience? It's fairly common. But if you don't have it, it still doesn't mean anything, just so you know. But if you have it, that's what's happening. And now you understand in certain places and certain people will actually overemphasize that. Osho did. Osho really got into ecstatic, a Kundalini dance he called it. Right? Getting into that, you start doing that as a practice, which is fun and great, and it can move energy, but it's not really something to really do a lot of, but it can be very therapeutic. But that's what's happening. Chi is awakening and opening, especially along the central channel, in these spinal channels.
Is that what the Sufis are doing?
Sufis are, when you get into an ecstatic state, they're getting into an ecstatic trance-like state, right? So when you get into a trance-like state, they're trying to cultivate chi indirectly. All these traditions are trying to awaken the chi with different methods and means, right? So, and the principle is chi awakens if the mind gets quiet. So when you get into an ecstatic state, you're trying to get your mind quiet, right? Or you're trying to move your body in a way where you kind of accentuate the movement of chi. But that's what they're doing, yeah. You see, same idea. So, spontaneous movements. A sweet taste in the mouth. It's a common phenomenon. It feels like you just swallowed honey. The elixir. That's how it's talked about. That's a little more advanced. Most people don't experience that until they get really close to some real Kundalini awakening. But that it's called different things all over the world, is the thing, right? But it's this actual biochemical substance that gets created in the body. The saliva switches, or something gets added to the saliva, where it literally tastes like something sweet and pleasurable. And you're supposed to swallow it because it has this transforming effect in your digestive tract. But people are chasing that. Just so you know, this is a thing that people are chasing. And you kind of see it everywhere in like Hollywood, in other things, when they're chasing this like secret physical substance that they think is going to make them immortal and give them powers. That's what they're referring to, just so you guys know.
So these objects like the elixir of life and the philosopher's stone.
They're
all
trying
just
to
represent
recreate that.
Yeah.
One aspect of it, right? And you just see it everywhere, this magical substance that is supposed to make you into something amazing, which happens naturally in us when you can cultivate properly. Really interesting, right? But that's a thing that's talked about. And even in the alchemical Christian point of view, you'll kind of see it referred to it as the oil, the anointed oil of Christ. Things like that, which is very interesting. Okay, so those are some signs that happen. But the main gist is, the most practical point is, basic healing is the foundation of it. The healing work we're all trying to do eventually will get you to the doorstep of real Kundalini awakening. This divine energy awakening is what we're really striving for, whether you know it or not, whether anyone knows it or not. And you may not get to in this lifetime, or you might not, or you might a little bit, who knows? But that's really the journey we're really on, being a human, because as they talk about in the ancient world, this Kundalini hasn't always been off. It's off in us now. And that's how they talk about especially when different systems talk about different ages of the earth, different ages of the world, golden, silver, bronze, dark age, right? The whole idea, the Kali Yuga, especially in Hinduism, it's off. Kundalini is off. It's turned off from birth for specific reasons. But the idea is, during golden ages, it's on. Imagine being born with fully awakened Kundalini. And that's what happens in golden ages, allegedly. And the idea is, there are beings who have it on all the time out there. Is how it's talked about. And they describe the true spiritual exalted beings of the cosmos have fully awakened Kundalini all the time. And they're born that way. Very interesting, very fascinating. But on the earthly realm, it's off.
Is that why we don't remember our past lives?
Yeah.
Is that the same?
That's the thing.
Yeah.
The talk is, as you awaken spiritually, as you do the work, these what's called minor powers start to awaken, which are really true human abilities, but we think of them as like extraordinary, supernatural, magical things. But knowing your past lives, they start to awaken. You start to get glimpses and knowings of, oh, this is why I like doing that. Oh, this is why I like you. Or this is why I like to go to that place. Or I've always wanted to go there, but I never have, and I don't know why I always want to go there. You start to really know why. Either glimpses or knowings or true understanding of what you've already done, because you can handle it then. Remember, as I talked about last time, past lives, which was the topic, we can't handle these things. It's off because we inherit so much trauma. I mean, there is an element of truth of basic Christianity's original sin, in essence, which is karma, from the Eastern point of view, right? But the ancient world would say, well, okay, fine, it's not permanent, you can change it, which is the difference from the general Christian point of view, right? You can't change it, so just, you gotta live with it, do the best you can. But the idea is, we are born with so much karma to work through, so much trauma, toxins, inherited genetics of, think about all your ancestors and the trauma they went through. For thousands of years. We got all of that in us, in our DNA. And you think it's not going to be turned off? We couldn't handle coursing of energy through us of that capacity because our nervous systems and energy systems they cannot handle. Because all that trauma is what, puts a damper. Trauma is like, bad analogy, but it's like the cholesterol in the artery, right? It's like the rust and the dam in the flow. That's what trauma and toxins and tensions are. Things can't flow in us, is what the end result is. Whether in our physical body, or energy body, or mental body, things don't flow. Things get stuck, right? And that's the whole point of the Buddha's message, that stuckness is what's causing our suffering. We get stuck to things, attached to things. We react to things. That's stuckness. It's all based on trauma that we inherit, that we experience and internalize and can't get over. But if you do, and you know it if you do, it changes a lot, right? People who have really healed certain aspects of trauma, it changes you for the better in wonderful ways. And the idea is because it's opened up this flow of energy again. And you open up enough, and you can access extraordinary levels of energy flow, which means you can access extraordinary levels of things you couldn't do before. That's the idea, right? So yeah, remember past lives, expanded intuition, right? Being able to connect to people and things at a long distance. In the ancient world, especially the Indian and the Taoist world, they will talk about these powers that we have access to. But they're all turned off in us. So to them, miracles weren't like something to go gaga goo over. Miracles were like, oh, you can do miracles. Okay, are you on the right track or the wrong track? Would be the next question. Why are you doing those miracles? Are you a true teacher? Are you trying to deceive us? Which is the right questions to ask. Because both can do miracles, seemingly miracles, right? And that's what Christ was warning about. That's the point. And the ancients would speak of, there were minor powers, there were minor powers, moderate powers, superpowers, and they would describe them, laid out, for anyone to read. They're called siddhis, S-I-D-D-H-I, siddhis, they're called powers in Sanskrit. And siddha is the one who has these abilities. Oh, and they would talk in detail about different siddhas, right? I've talked about them in the past. Different beings who could do all this stuff. Not just one, many throughout the ages. But we can too, was the idea, if you can get there. And along the way, minor powers occur. And the minor powers are simply things that a lot of us know. Not getting tired all day long and night. It's kind of a minor power, right?
Be a great power.
Yeah.
I need that one.
Or being 60 and being able to eat anything you want and not have it affect you. That's pretty cool. But although you don't eat anything you want, you eat wisely, but still if you did, your digestion is so strong, you have so much energy, you can handle anything you eat. It's kind of a minor power. Right? It's these simple things.
Yeah.
Minor powers are having, lucid dreaming. Those are a little bit further along, it's kind of a moderate minor power. It is past 3, so whoever has to leave can. So, like I said, I could keep going. Questions?
So Kundalini can wake up in any way specific to the person, what I guess makes most sense to their psyche, right?
Exactly.
So I
Right.
mean, I don't want to go down like a personal rabbit hole too deeply, but I told you about like how I had that experience where Vishnu came to me like a year ago, and you had just said something that had resonated so strongly in how it comes, because I hear other people talking about Kundalini, and I'm like, okay, well, what does that look like? I hear people like the shaking and stuff like that. But like when this happened to me, and I'm starting to think that it maybe was a Kundalini awakening, it was like I was encompassed by like this bright, beautiful bluish void light, and Vishnu standing in front of me. But while he's there smiling at me, behind him is this giant coil of spinning prayer wheels with light coming through each of them, different directions, this coil all spinning. And what's also happening is like the most beautiful, powerful bass subtone, like music is playing at the same time, and then all the wheels clicking together, and I'm back in reality.
Yeah.
Does that seem like a Kundalini, like, triggering moment? Like,
That is a exalted moment that is part of the Kundalini process, I would say. Because the basic thing to take away today is Kundalini is not a moment.
yeah,
It's not a
process,
thing,
yeah.
it's a process. It's a massive, long, drawn-out process. And then some of the moments along it are very extraordinary. But some of the most basic moments along of it are the most mundane, normal moments that we wouldn't consider Kundalini, but it is part of the process. When you have a moment of loving kindness, compassion, when you have a moment of true love, a moment of healing, right? Those all kind of fall under the category of embodying this divine energy that's greater than you, which we're all kind of seeking. But that's how it happens. There's a literal embodiment process that's hardwired in our DNA as a human that happens.
Years ago, I studied under Montauk Chia and the microcosmic orbit, but no, he never explained it like you just did. It's like,
Oh, good.
I mean, seriously, it just made so much more sense. I mean, he said this and that, but this came,
Yeah.
brought it together.
Good, good, good. Yeah, yeah. Yes.
So, is it
No.
normal then for the awakening to happen over several lifetimes? Or?
Oh,
is
yeah.
it- Yeah.
There is no one way,
Yeah.
is the most important thing. There's no one way, there's no, it's happened, it's gone, it's done. It's not even like that. It's a literal process. And how I describe it is like pre-Kundalini, there's like absence of awareness of Kundalini process. There's like pre-Kundalini experiences happening. Then there's full-blown beginnings of Kundalini to like classical Kundalini. And the ancients would say, once your Kundalini is awakened, good, now you're in first grade. Now you can start the real work. And so they would say, great, now, because what is the point? Remember, the point is embodying this divine principle. Okay, what does that mean? Well, embodying means to ground it, to open, to ground, and then to become, right? Well, Kundalini, the point is to become that, right? That's the transformation process. So the ancients would then, once it's awakened, then you spend all your time and efforts to literally transform all the elements of your body in ways we can't even fathom, to become a living divine embodiment. You're not really human anymore the way we think of. You follow? And so that's the full extent of the entire process we're talking about here, that Kundalini is part of.
Okay, now here's the question. How does the orgasm and sexual energy?
Oh, we didn't talk about that,
No,
did
you
we?
didn't
That
bring
was,
it up.
that was a juicy part. Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. So sexual energy is Kundalini energy.
Yeah.
That's how it manifests in all muggles and non-muggles, right? It's manifesting in all of us all the time as raw sexual energy. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So in most people, we have to move it and discharge it. Males let it out. Females activate and go through the process. They have a different mechanism. They're not letting out so much, but they go through the whole process of having an orgasm. The whole orgasm experience is a burst. It's like a flash burst of 1% of Kundalini, if you will, as an analogy. This is what the orgasm is, the experience of that. That's how we kind of worship it in a normal world, right? Because that's what that is. And so that's why it's so powerful, so amazing, so healing, but so addictive, right? And so alluring and all these things. But that's what that is. It gives us, the orgasm is the momentary experience of what your greatest potential is. And then it's gone. And you want it again, and it's gone. So we're chasing it constantly. But the sexual energy is that, it's all, you can think of it, it's like the coiled serpent breathing is sexual energy you're feeling. That's the analogy. And so we try to deal with that as much as we can. Most people are discharging it, like I said.
Yeah.
Okay? From a young age, and especially males have a hard time with this, just strictly speaking from how the bodies are set up. The women's menstrual cycle helps women dramatically regulate that energy. The male doesn't have that, right? So our only mechanism is to push it out for most humans. And that's what guys struggle with all the time, okay? Now, true, when you get into spiritual cultivation that talks about sexuality in a healthy way, they simply state then, okay, look, you've got to bring it up.
Just research.
You've got to bring it up inside, keep it within, contain it, circulate it, all these types of things. And in other words, they're talking about Kundalini energy. You see, because if you cannot discharge sexual energy, if you can get to that place, only then does that sexual energy become what it truly is, which is that Kundalini.
So it's the same thing as like creative energy.
So either you're discharging it physically through sex, or you're channeling it into creativity. Yeah, thank you. That's also that's like the next higher step up, right? Because then you're focusing more on the third chakra, second chakra, third chakra, upward movement of it. So that's kind of a higher manifestation of sexual energy. You see that, again, from the thing is, women have an easier ability to do that, to bring it up through into the higher chakras, than a man who has an easier time letting it out for specific reasons, right? And so, therefore, yeah, creative energy is a specific channeling of that, and that's kind of what happens, how you are going to expend your sexual energy no matter what. Either through sex or creativity.
Interesting.
Or
Mantas.
just
Yeah.
tiring yourself out in some way. You will
Okay.
expend that,
That sounds
is the thing.
too.
Every human is expending that energy, that natural, primordial, fundamental vitality they have. That's what that is, you see? So this, what we've talked about today, is the ultimate leveling up of that. How to take that to the next level so it's not expended, because the expenditure can be good or bad. It can be a waste. It can create another human. It can create something else. Art, projects, a life, whatever, right? But the point is, there's also a way to use that energy to transform yourself. But for the right reason. And that's an important asterisk, because you can channel it for other reasons. And that's kind of where the black magic, dark tantra whole aspect gets in. They're channeling that sexual energy for other personal egoic reasons. You see? So the highest is channeling it for a more divine reason, right? To fully awaken, to fully tap into your full potential and become all that you can, in that sense, right? So yeah.
And it doesn't have to necessarily be a waste too, because it becomes meaningful in a way. It's an exchange of energy, and then you
Exactly.
can also create I heard something about creating like a microcosmic orbit together
Right.
in this, I don't know.
Yeah.
Big, lots of,
Yeah.
so many rabbit holes.
Right. But thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, that's what that is. So sexual energy is kind of the basic thing that we all have to come grips with.
Montauk only focused on the men doing it. He didn't really even, I guess, bother with explaining it to the women. There weren't very many women in the class, but just
Yeah.
that men need to be doing that.
Because
which
men
is-
need all the help they can get with that, honestly.
Oh, okay.
Literally, I mean, they need help with that. Women don't always have to start there,
Yeah.
is the thing. And women have a different actual focus too that they can focus on when they're doing the lower Dantian meditations.
Okay.
You know, it's kind of different. They'll teach kind of a different focal point for women than men when they're doing those meditations.
He didn't say anything.
But men need all the help they can get. That's why. Most of these were created for men
That's why I love
too.
it.
Yeah, literally. To give them, you know, the Native American Lodge ceremony. Men need it. It was created for men, and men need that ceremony. And that's the thing. All right. Anything else?
Can you just evoke that ceremony you were just talking about? The ceremony you just mentioned?
The lodge. The lodge?
Yeah.
The sweat lodge?
Is that what it is? Montauk?
Oh, you're talking about
Oh,
sweat
Montauk
lodge?
Chia?
Montauk Chia. Okay, I never heard that term. I just wondered.
Montauk Chia is a famous author, proponent of some Taoist practices from like the 80s and 90s. He's written like tons of books. He focused on the microcosmic orbit, like we talked about, how to really work on that, awaken that, practice that, and he kind of hyper focuses on that, is the thing. So it's not like basic Taoist yoga, but he also kind of takes it on off different tangents because he has like how to cultivate it for sexual use, how to cultivate it for like healing use, you know, and so that's who she's referring to,
Okay.
Montauk Chia.
All right.
He's been around for a while, but.
I see.
And then I mentioned the sweat lodge ceremony, the native sweat lodge ceremony, right? The purification ritual of sweating that traditionally was only done for men, because men needed it. Generally speaking, you know, the woman's menstrual cycle is like one of the most amazing purifications that a woman goes through. Is the thing.
Well, I think fasting is a extremely wonderful way
Yeah.
of purification. I mean,
Right,
it prepares you to use the energy then. You're just more
Right.
in balance and so sensitive.
Yeah. So next time you're meditating and you have some weird spontaneous movements, or, you know, it's the chi, anytime there's an activation of chi, that is part of the pre-Kundalini process. That activation of chi, depending on where it shows up in your reality, it'll show up differently. So in the physical body, it'll show up as a physical movement. In the emotional body, it'll show up as like a feeling
Yeah.
or a sensation. In the mental body, it'll show up as a thought or a vision or an image or color.
Oh, yeah.
It's all chi movement. That's how they would describe it. It's all movement of chi. For some reason or another.
Do you think that after Kundalini awakening, or if there's movement, it needs a certain kind of support?
Totally. That's a whole different.
Because I think I had one, I think I mentioned it,
Hmm?
because I was doing this Siddha yoga stuff with the guru, and the milk and honey stuff was happening, and I don't know if you're more vulnerable to demonic things, because I've been having a really rocky time.
Yes, you are. Just answer your question. Yeah, your energy is opened up, right? That whole process, if what you're experiencing it is kind of a more advanced stage, if that's happening, that means your energy fields are dramatically opened up and bright. You are lit up, especially in those moments you're having some. Anytime you're having an extraordinary experience, you're lit up. Your energy body goes really bright, and so on the other side, you're lit up. And so it's like moths coming to a bright light then. You see? You're lit up and you'll have good butterflies go, oh, she needs some help, let me go help her. You'll have then other, not to pick on butterflies and moths, but then you have other moths that'll be like, ooh, let's go feed off her.
Do you see that
Basically
kind
happens.
of work with people? Because I feel like I need, like the guru is not.
This is where, I mean, it's hard having a guru connection in the world we live in now.
Yeah.
Is the thing, that's why it's hard.
Yeah.
This is where foundational mindfulness practice comes in.
I've been resisting the siddha meditation. I've been resisting,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure what's going on.
This is where, you know, because, okay, you're having, say, what you're calling a demonic experience. What really that translates into is you're having uncomfortable feelings and thoughts come up. Whether they're yours or someone else's or whatever, it doesn't matter. Something's coming up in you that's making you uncomfortable, right? Whether it's sensations or thoughts or whatever. And so that uncomfortable feeling you're having a hard time with. You're reacting to it. So it's coming up and then you're having trouble with it, so you don't know what to do with it, it's creating more problems, or you're essentially reacting with what's called aversion. I don't want to feel this. Make it go away. Is the general what's happening inside, right?
Yeah.
So that's why mindfulness is so important, because that trains you on how to deal with that. How to deal with discomfort. Pain, discomfort is really how the essence of true mindfulness practice, right? So that's really the remedy for what's going on.
And that's different from the meditation that they were teaching. Because that was energy,
Well,
that was energy stuff, right?
If what I'm saying is new to you, then obviously it is different.
I feel
than
like
what
I
you've
used
learned,
to
right,
meditate in a
yeah.
mindfulness way, and then I started the siddha
If
class,
you're
and I
doing-
don't do that anymore.
So, and that's kind of this a different topic, but you know, if you're not putting direct attention on what you're feeling and your thoughts in a very neutral way, then you're not doing mindfulness. Because that's what mindfulness is. But if you're putting your attention on something for a specific reason to make something happen, that's not mindfulness. That's more of a concentration meditation. You follow?
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably what was going on, and that's what happens when you try to move energy and do stuff. You're doing concentration meditations, which is great, but you also need mindfulness meditations, which helps you relax into and accept what's happening. You follow?
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the key. That would be something you want to probably focus on that more. And we can talk about that later, me and you, but that's kind of the gist of it. And again, this is why the Buddha really pushed this. This is what I shared with you. It's basic Buddhism, right? That's why he was here. That's why he came to like, guys, we need this. If you aren't directly practicing it on purpose, it can be tough. This is why, because things are messing with us constantly, is the truth. Not just real people, they're triggering us all the time too. Add on that, invisible people triggering you. Add on that your own parts of you inside from the past that are triggering you.
I'm thinking about the past a lot.
Yeah.
Like all these regrets, just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And it's like I can't.
Mindfulness.
So whatever you
Back to
experience you
this one.
had, that burst of energy you experienced, that's great, but you know, the basic gist of healing is, okay, if you have an activation of healing, that's gonna pull up stuff now. That's gonna open the door. You busted the door open, some door. Great. Now stuff's coming out of the door. Now what are you gonna do? Right, that's kind of where you're at. So, okay, now mindfulness will help you deal with the stuff coming out of the door. The regrets and whatever, resentments and all this stuff. We hope it's coming out, all right, it's rushing past you. What are you gonna do? If you don't have mindfulness, you usually end up trying to close the door again.
So
Right.
you're saying meditate in a still kind of way.
Well, you have to meditate in a mindful way. And that's a process which we need to talk about.
I've
We
got that
do,
book that
yeah.
you recommended, the meditation.
The Mindful Illuminated,
Yeah,
that book, yeah.
I haven't opened it.
Yeah, but to answer your question, that will be helpful to you too. Yeah. And look, what you can do going home is, if you're starting to feel uncomfortable, something's affecting you, find your breath, tune into what you're feeling, tune into your sensations, tune into, okay, what am I feeling right now? What is this? Okay, I'm feeling this weird thing in the back of my neck, and it's like doing this weird thing. It's making me think of something in the past. Okay. Once you find what you feel, then find your breath. Okay, where's my breath? Okay, let me just stay with my breath. I'm okay. If you just stay with your breath, that's going to help you stay anchored and grounded. Just start doing that. Yeah.
Another aspect of Buddhism is unconditional love. So in those moments of inner conflict or struggle, we can kind of step into this unconditional love, because usually there's something that's taking us out of love that that's making us uncomfortable at the moment. So just trying to be, in
What
the
I would
breath,
add-
in the moment, in a state of being in love, or love being.
What I would add is you have to be able to do that to be effective, is the thing. And so most people can't do that in the moment when you're triggered,
Yes.
when you're feeling something.
Of course.
There's an inability to do nothing but react to that. So that means you have to practice going to that state when you're not triggered.
Yes.
You see?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm talking to myself here.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so when you practice going there, that's a whole different practice that you can just stay on top of, to
Yeah.
cultivate,
Yeah.
right?
Practice, and it needs discipline.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I've found, alcohol, drugs, this has been, no, especially when you're purifying and working with these energies, for me, I don't mess with any of it. It's just, it doesn't help, it would hinder. I think it opens up the portals to let the stuff get in, the moss.
Yeah.
So,
Different people are,
But
that's
that's
why there's
me.
so many different ways
Not for
to
everybody.
go about all of this. Different people are attuned to different things and are interested in different things. Some people want none of this. Absolutely none. Keep it absolutely clear and simple. No philosophy, no talk. I just want to practice. Zen is great for them. Theravada Buddhism is great for them. You got nothing but sit and practice. Sit and practice mindfulness. It's all you got. Great. They're going to go a long way very quickly. Other people, they want to know. They want to really get into the nitty gritty, feel all of it, pull it apart, understand it. And you've got things like Tibetan Buddhism, you've got things like, getting into the philosophy of things, different aspects of Hinduism, all these things you can kind of really pull apart and understand. Other people on top of that, or independently, just want to experience energy in all these subtle ways and these different states and all these things. You've got all these practices to do that. And that's the beauty of it. It's like so many different ways and means to cultivate. And that's why you have for example, in Hinduism, they would talk about these paths. You need to know. They would give you the outline off the bat, like I've kind of done. I've been trying to do. Give you the outline. Okay, here are your options. Where do you fall? What do you want to do? How's it going for you? Are you getting your results? If not, hey, look over here. Maybe you're kind of missing this. See if that's what you need. Maybe not. Oh, okay. Then can you check off what's happening here? But kind of what we talked about today applies to all of it. No matter what path you're taking, you're going to experience the process of Kundalini phenomenon. It's going to happen. And if you know it, someone in a very devotional bhakti path, it's going to be very different for them, is the thing. Kundalini will appear as bliss. And that's what you're trying to get to, this state of continuous bliss and exaltation. Those are classical signs of Kundalini awakening. The bliss in the body. You see? Someone else wants a cosmic awareness, a knowing, this expanded state of consciousness. That's also a sign of Kundalini awakening. And those are more for the wisdom-based paths, seeking more expanded state of mind through expanding meditative traditions. So you've got other people could care less about either one. They just want to be a good person, do good, do the best they can, and help everyone out, have as much compassion for humanity, and be a vessel of the Lord, if you will, right? It's karma yoga. Oh, Hinduism talked about that. Oh yeah. Krishna very clearly outlined that, karma yoga. Great. Every moment, can you do everything without thinking of yourself? Oh, now that's kind of hard, isn't it? Every moment, can you do something without expecting anything in return? Whoa. But that's the path of karma yoga. Imagine someone doing that all day long. They don't have to know a thing. They don't have to even have any experience or any, cultivation of energy. But they are unknowingly cultivating all that as they're practicing absolute unconditional compassion for others in every moment, right?
Do you think that's kind of a dangerous territory for some people who might be prone to being a people pleaser?
Oh, totally, yeah. Karma yoga is just not the thing you do. It's a whole process and practice, and it's not. The thing is, by like, none of these paths, ideally, like kind of what I promote, you shouldn't just do those exclusively, because they both all have pros and cons, benefits and like things that they don't always really fully kind of miss out on, things that you miss out. So you want to like balance it out. And again, in traditional Hindu understanding, it's always been a balance. Even when Krishna's talking about bhakti is the way, okay, but still you have to apply it with karma, and knowledge, gyan, wisdom is still important.
So is this kind of the idea of like, you can, like religion is like following someone else's path, but spirituality is paving your own path with everything you learn along the way?
Right.
Okay.
Usually, ideally with some guidance by someone else who kind of mastered it, is the idea, right? Even in Buddhism, you've got, metta, compassion, meditation. A big part of that is cultivating compassion, goodwill for others in a meditative state. So they're cultivating bhakti, right? But Buddhism is not a bhakti-based, tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're doing Tibetan Buddhism, it's got a lot more of that. Yeah, so it's more of a balance. Yeah, someone with boundary issues cannot do karma yoga. They should not do karma yoga. They have to heal their boundaries first, right? They have to do some basic work and work on their energy. They need some energy practices to really develop their energy first. Some mindfulness practices to learn how to deal with others, with other energies, right? Then you can apply.
Yeah, karma yoga is tough because you might think, oh, I'm doing this totally selflessly, but then you analyze it, no wait, there's something hiding there.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm doing this because I want to feel good.
Yeah, it's like I teach, so at first I thought, look, I'm doing, this totally but then I started thinking, no wait, there may be something that I'm trying to fulfill.
Karma yoga is really a way to prove and actualize if what you're doing is working.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. It's a way to see the proof, see if the proof is in the pudding, to see if you can actually put into practice with another human being everything you've been working on. Is really what karma yoga is. So it shouldn't be done by itself. A rare soul can only do it by itself.
Yeah.
Is the thing. And those rare souls, we know off the bat, they're like the saintly people of the planet who are just like super saints and can do no wrong, and that's the rare individual. And a lot of normal people are practicing karma yoga and they don't know it, which is kind of what you have going on for like most atheist, agnostic people who don't care about any of this stuff, but they want to be a good person, right? They're kind of practicing karma yoga.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't say it that way. For the good of humanity, all those reasons. All right, guys.
Thank you so
We went
much.
super overtime.
Yeah, thank you.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Almost 3:45. Can we do anything to help you tidy up?
Well, I gotta put the chairs back.
Chairs